Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna pole saw model 525 PT5S. The customer has requested that we replace the shaft assembly, and I'm going to show you how I go about doing that. So the first thing I like to do is remove the cutter head from the end of the upper end of the pole. There's a clamping screw and there's a centering screw. Centering screw comes out, the clamping screw gets loosened, and you pull the cutter head off. Bam, done. Next. We're going to grab our new pole assembly out of the box, make sure everything's there, and get it ready for installation on the power head. So once I see that I got a new straight pole assembly, not anything that's been damaged in shipping, we can move forward on this. So the first thing we want to do is loosen the clamping screw for the throttle handle assembly. Once that's loose and it doesn't have to come out, that handle will flop around on there. Then there's a single screw in the top cover, and underneath that you'll find the kill wires and the throttle cable. Now there's a centering screw that locks the tube to the engine, and there's two clamping screws that have to be loosened. A piece of tape on the pole with a little arrow on it shows you where the centering screw is, and that will have to get lined up in the power head, and no big deal. So we loosen our two clamping screws, and once that's done, this pole assembly is going to slide right out from the power head. It'll slide right out through the throttle handle, and there you go, it's separated. Don't worry about loose parts. All the new parts you need are in the new shaft assembly. Now you see that there's a plastic bushing on the new one, but there's not a plastic bushing on the one we just took apart. Well, you got to go fishing on this one and pull that plastic piece out. I've been told that that assembly won't go back together if you forget to pull the old plastic bushing out of there. Before we reassemble, we're going to put some grease on the adapter. That's what that is. It's actually kind of like a shear pin. A lot of times when you find someone complains that the head won't turn, this shear, I guess it's a shear pin adapter, they just call it an adapter, on this end or on the other end could be broken. So we're going to transfer our trigger guard from the old assembly to the new one and discard our old pole. We're done with it. Now from here it's just reverse order. Put things back together the way you found them, right? We will slide the new shaft assembly through the throttle handle. And then we'll push it into the power head. How do you know when it's engaged in the clutch? How do you know when it's in there far enough? Well, if the hole in the tube where the centering bolt goes, if that's accessible and the bolt goes in there, then you know the whole assembly is deep enough that that adapter is in the end of the clutch drum. And you can clearly see the hole in the tube by looking through this threaded hole. Spin that screw in, we're good. Then we're just going to crank down on the clamping screws, a couple light ugga-duggas, and we're good. So now our throttle cable, that came loose when we took things apart. And it's kind of a unique system, but the ferrule on the end of the cable goes into a receiver on the carburetor end of the cable. Just push it through the hole and the spring tension will hold that thing together. Then there's a nut on the cable that goes into a holder. Press that into place. Make sure your kill wires are centered back in their home. and then line up the little dowels on the plastic cover with the power head. Put your screw back in. You're done. We still got a couple things to do on this end. We got to tighten up the clamp for the throttle handle. And then we're going to clamp down the trigger guard. One screw. Looks good. And then the one piece that we have left here is the harness hook. Pretty simple stuff. Just push it over the tube and run your wing nutted bolt through it. So I found that replacing the tube assembly, even though it costs more money than just the upper or just the lower tube, when you factor in labor and the high cost of those other assemblies, it's cheaper just to bolt a new one on. So we're going to put some grease on this spline adapter, and then we're going to put our power head back on. Now it looks like this guy pinched the saw and the chain is kind of hung up here. So we're going to address this issue first. Clean things up a little bit. And through the magic of editing, we're all caught up. Now, this job of putting the cutter head back on the pole looks simple enough, and it is. There's just a couple little tips that you got to follow sometimes. Pulling that inner shaft out and get the splines lined up first before you try and push the cutter head on the end of the tube, that makes a difference. But when the cutter head won't actually go over the tube, then you gotta get a little bit creative. Now our clamping screw is loose, but the thing still doesn't fit over the tube. So get yourself a scrunch or some other wedge type screwdriver or whatever, and just open that gap up a little bit. And then this guy's got his head in the way, but once you do that, things will pop together. Look through the threaded hole on the cutter head, and when you can see in through the hole of the tube, put your centering bolt in. Now you know everything's living where it's supposed to be. Remove your screwdriver and crank down your clamping screw. So that's all I got for you on the 525 PT5S shaft replacement. Thanks for watching. Later.